Crafty. This tutorial is showing how to make the word home using square knots. I had a request for this from a subscriber, so I wanted to attempt it and see if I can make it happen. So for this, you're going to need 59 pieces of cord, 80 inches long. I'm using 3mm cotton cord. I will leave all of the measurements in the description box below. Each of the letters ended up being 5 inches wide, 4.5 inches long. The whole piece altogether ended up being 22 inches. So it's a pretty big piece. The first thing I did was just tie my first square knot and do a row of square knots at the top just to kind of give it a border and just give it a little bit extra than just having the letters. So I'm just going to do square knots all the way down for this first row. And now, once you finish this row, you're going to go back and do another row of square knots. And whenever you do the second row, you're going to skip the first two cords and you go in between each one. Now we're going to start on the letter H. We'll do this one letter at a time. So for H, what you're going to do is you're going to decide how far down you would like for your letter to start. I think I did it. This is about 1.5 inches, maybe a little less than that, but a little over 1 inch. And you're going to do, close to 1.5 inches. And you're going to tie on your first square knot. So for letter H, you're going to do 2 square knots, and then you will skip 12 cords and you'll tie on 2 more square knots. When doing it like this, trying to get them the same length can be a little tricky, or positioned in the same spot. But I just measured a little bit and adjusted until I got everything positioned the way I want it. Once we finish these two, it'll be easier to form the rest of the letter. So for the next row, you're going to do 1 square knot in between the 2 that you already have, and then you will repeat this pattern 2 more times on each side. So we finished our first 6 rows, and each letter has 13 rows all the way down. For the next row, we're going to do 7 square knots, and they're going to go all the way across, and then the row below it is going to go all the way across, but it will have 6 square knots. Now we're going to finish the bottom portion of the H, and we're going to continue the pattern of doing 2 square knots, then 1 in the middle, then 2, then 1. And we're going to end up with 2 at the bottom. We're going to do 5 more rows on each side. Each letter will have 2 chords that are not a part of the letter in between, so we're going to skip those 2 chords, and then we're going to skip 4 more strands to start on O, and then we're going to do our first square knot for the letter O here, and we're going to do 5 knots for the first row. For the next row, we need 6 knots, so you tie your next knot by grabbing 2 of the chords that are a part of the knot and then 2 chords beside it to make it a little bit wider. And then we're going to do 6 knots on this row. Row 3 is our last row that we increase, so this one we're going to have 7 knots. For row 4, you're going to do 1 square knot right below these 2 here, and then you're going to do 1 on the other end. So do 1 knot, skip 12 strands, and do 1 more. Just like we did for the letter H, we're going to do 2, then 1. We're going to do that pattern for rows 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. For rows 11, 12, and 13, you're actually repeating rows 1, 2, and 3, but we're doing it in reverse. So we're going to do 7 all the way across, then we're going to decrease and do 6 all the way across, and then the last row will be 5 all the way across. Alright, moving on to letter M. We're going to skip 2 again. That is not going to be part of the letter. And then we're going to start on these next 4 strands with our first knot. For row 1, you're going to do 3 square knots, skip 4, and then do 3 on the other side. So 3, then skip 4 strands, and 3 on the other side. The second row will have 3, skip 2 strands, and then 3 more. For row 3, you will do 7 knots and it will go all the way across. For row 4, you're going to do 1 knot, going to skip 4 strands, then you'll do 2 knots, skip 4 strands again, and do 1 knot. And I'll do this one a little bit slower. Row 5, we're going to do 2 knots, we're going to skip 4 strands again, do 1 knot, which is going to go directly in between those 2 that you just did in the last row, and then you're going to skip 4 strands again and do 2 knots on the other side. So for rows 6 through 13, the remaining rows, we're going to do the same pattern that we have done with the H and the O. We're on both sides, we do 1 then 2. So we're going to continue doing that same pattern with this one until we get to the 13th row. Alright, to our final letter, E, we are going to skip 2 strands and we're going to do our first row, which will be 7 knots. Row 2 will go all the way down again and it will be 6 knots. And we're going to do one more row all the way down, and this one will have 7 knots again. For row 4, you will just be doing 1 knot, and then row 5, you will do 2 knots below that one. Rows 6, 7, and 8 will all have 5 knots. Row 9 will have 2 knots, row 10 will have 1. For rows 11, 12, and 13, we're going to repeat what we did for rows 1, 2, and 3. So we'll do 7 knots, then 6, then 7 again. And here we have home. Now I'm just going to do 2 more rows all the way across, skipping that inch in between like I did at the top, and you will have your final product. Now doing this part, it's easier to do a couple of knots and then of the first row and then a knot of the second. It's really hard to go all the way down and make it even. So I found out that doing a couple knots of each row definitely helps make that more straight. but that's going to be it, guys. I hope you like this tutorial, and if you have any requests or anything that you would like for me to try to make for you, please let me know. Comment below, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.